question I was asked the other day after I'd done a YouTube on 3 great perennials was, what do I do during autumn to these plants? And I thought I'd just come out and go through a few of them and explain what I do during autumn. Now this one here is a Strantia, and it's a Strantia major, and it's flowering again. Now I cut this one back in sort of late spring, early summer, when it had done most of its flowering and it had done it for a couple of months. But I knew from experience that this one would come back and give me a reflower, which it's done. And a lot of Astrantias do that if you can get them early enough. Now, with this particular one, I just leave it alone completely. Don't touch it at all. Because through autumn and winter, it will simply die away. Now, some plants die quite elegantly and some die a bit scrappily. But this one's kind of in between those two. So I tend to leave it alone up until spring, and I don't do any clearing at all. Now, you shouldn't do that with all plants, and I don't. Some plants die absolutely terribly, and one of the worst ones for it are these things here. These are osters. This is a particular type of oster, a tripartum type, but all osters tend to have this horrible sort of dying phase, and mainly the big ones do that. And this is quite small at the minute. Now this has had a bad slug attack, and it came from a different part of the garden. I put it in here not so long back, but it's not going to be long now before that one is ready to just die away. So as colder nights approach, we tend to find out which ones are going to die nicely and gracefully. Now I'm going to start with the grasses, because with the grasses, with most ornamental grasses, they all tend to die very, very nicely indeed. And I just leave those alone until spring, when I will have a cutback at that point. There are several different types, and especially the Merlinias, as this one here. This one will look after itself, and it will just die away completely, and it'll just flop away, and it will just one day you'll come out and it'll have cascaded down to the floor. There'll be nothing left of it, and all you simply do then is just clear it up. Things like ferns, you're either a tidy gardener or a messy gardener, or maybe both, like me. And with ferns in particular, you've got to judge each one differently. And I do. This one's looking pretty good at the moment. Some are evergreen, some are not. So if they're looking like they're dying away, I tend to just leave them alone, and I don't mess about with them. Now, with most of my perennials, I tend to do the same thing. If I'm quite happy leaving them as they are, I'll leave them as they are. This one here, this is an inula down the back, and this is an inula. And it will get to a point where it'll just look a little bit scrappy, and eventually I will want to cut that one back down. Geums, pretty much, I leave that alone because it's practically evergreen, and it did well for me last year, and I just left it alone. And then in spring it just started its regrowth. Other plants you must leave alone, like this Lysomachia, and this one's Lysomachia clethroides, and although it's in a pot and it's very small, it does have a stunning autumn colour, and so you need to leave that one alone anyway. Euphorbias, some euphorbias have this stunning look about them, and we'll go back through autumn colours as more of autumn encroaches, and we'll have a look at some of the interesting colours that I've got up here at Grassy Bottom. So again, we've got things like the asters, or they're now known as symphotrichums, and I would leave those well alone for quite some time. As you can see, we're in September, and there's not a problem with those. This is their time to flower, so we leave them alone. Other things like these, this is a rheum, so these rheums, you've got to kind of judge it yourself. Now this is its second leaf flush. The first leaf flush, we got into that hot period during the summer, and it didn't like it, so it just died away. Like the yellow one at the bottom there, it died away, and that was pretty much it. Now with that one, I would wait till it all goes yellow like that, and then I would collect up all those leaves, shred them, put them onto your compost heap, or put in the green bin. Now the rest of them, that I have here, one in particular that was mentioned was this one here, and this is a Rudbeckia, and this is Demii, and this one can go on for quite some time yet, and it could go on for another month unless the weather turns really badly. And at that time, it will go a really yellow colour in the leaf as well, and it'll stand quite nice. And I would leave that one alone. I wouldn't touch it, and I wouldn't touch it till autumn. Things like the Eupatoriums stand well through winter. So again, they have some interesting seed heads, and they're just starting their show now. As you can see, that's quite an interesting fluffy seed head, along with the other bits that are just going over. Now, again, I'd leave that alone because it does tend to have an interesting autumn colour. This Lythrum, this is Feuerkerze, and it means fire candle. And what happens to this one is it will go bright red in all of its stems, so you'd leave that one alone. Then it'll look a little bit twiggy and you'll want to cut it down. Now, I'm not going to go through all the plants here because there's just too many, but you've got things like the Euphorbia. That's Wolfenii, and it will pretty much stay evergreen all through the year, as will the purple one at the back. Oh, it's not purple yet, but it's about to go purple. It is called Euphorbia purpureum, and that will go really purple. So again, we've got some ornamental grasses, pretty much look after themselves. We've got things like the Persicarias. Not so great at dyeing those ones. They tend to look a little bit ropey, so I would probably clean those away. As a general rule, I'll just leave most of my stuff alone. This is a Sanguisorba, which has been moved here recently, and that's why it looks such a terrible state. But again, I'll just leave that alone and let it do its dyeing, let it dye back in. And then when it gets to beyond the point where I've had enough of it, I'll chop it back. So we've got the Ilotelephums, which are the old sedums. They pretty much do their own thing through the season. And eventually they will go into a kind of a mush, and they'll practically fall apart themselves, and then you just remove all the dead and the squidgy bits, and once it does that, you will find that at the base it will already be sending up new leaves for next year, but they'll just be little stumpy things. There'll be nothing in there, a bit like a hosta. So we've got things like this, pretty much amazing me, this one. I don't know where it's come from. I can only think it's the Shirley series, and it's a bit of a smaller one, but it just keeps flowering, won't stop flowering. And I will just leave that alone now. If it does turn out to be just an annual, as I suspect it is, it'll just die away at the end of the year, and you'll just have a little bit of leaf tidy to do. Tidy that up. So another Ilotelephum that's going over is this one, and this was a very, very early one. So I did expect this to happen to this one, and it will die away quicker, and I'll simply remove all the stuff away from it. Now, I've got things like this Achillea that are doing really well. This is its second flush, and there's another one over there, not so great, but they're doing the second flushes, and they're doing okay, so I shall just leave them to their own devices. Let's have a look what else we've got over here. So, these beds are newly establishing, so they're not really where I want them at the moment. So I'll just leave them alone. A lot of the grasses, as I've said before, pretty much look good all the way through winter, and I wouldn't touch them at all. And we've got Monadas. Now, Monadas, for me, tend to, once the clump's established, we get some nice stiff growth on those, and they can look interesting through winter, and they can hold on to these seed heads, but not all the time. It depends which variety it is. So another Molinia, and as I mentioned earlier, that'll turn a butty yellow colour, and then you just walk out one day, a wind will have hit it, and it'll have just blown it over completely, and all you have to do then is just clear it away. Things like these Eleniums, these are quite stiff, and each one will act differently, but they tend to have a nice finish to the year, so I tend to leave those alone as well. So there's a Phalictrum there, and again, that has a lovely silhouette through autumn and winter, so I leave it alone. And I do this, to be quite honest, if I had to use rule of thumb, I'd say I leave everything practically except the osters and the Islatelophiums and that kind of fleshy type thing, including the rheums. I tend to clear those away, but the rest I will simply leave alone and I won't touch them. And another reason I don't touch them is because insects overwinter in them. As a result of that, you get the birds coming in, finding them, pecking them out and eating them through winter. So you're doing the birds a favour by not cutting them down. Now, we've got a lot of clean and tidy gardeners out there who I know as soon as September comes, October, they're wanting to clear away and clean up. But I'll be honest, I don't. I leave that alone. And as I said, things like the osters I will do. Again, look, looking a bit scrappy, so that one will be sorted out. So the garden up at Grassy Bottom is looking okay. I mean, we're in September, and obviously mine's a late season border. And as such, it always looks good right through the season. So I tend not to have to do a lot to it at this time of year. And I'll reiterate again that I would rather leave everything till spring and not touch it. And then as the spring approaches, I will then go in and start changing things, or rather start cutting back. Because if you're not sure what you've got and you're not sure what sort of an autumn colour it might produce, then just leave well alone. You're not going to do any harm whatsoever. And sometimes it'll surprise you just what things do during autumn and winter. So, yeah, things like this Fatsia japonica, this will get some sort of winter damage to it because it really requires a well-protected area, and it's got just that here, but it will tend to lose its leaves like that. So as autumn comes, it'll tend to lose a lot more. The smaller ones tend to hang on in there, like these ones. They tend to hang on, and they'll be okay. Trees and shrubs. I don't really do a lot to trees and shrubs unless I'm not happy with the shape. As with this one, it's still in development. It's still in a process where I'm trying to get it back in nicely. But this year, it's got to this phase now. It's had 2 cuts. I was going to give it another one before autumn kicks in. But actually, I think I'm going to leave it for the autumn show because I feel that we're going to get a good autumn show this year due to the hot weather we've already had. So I'll leave them alone. Now, trees, I'll probably reshape and I'll reevaluate them. And I've got some quite mature trees that were already here, and I will reevaluate them. That prunus, I will reevaluate it, see if there's any bit that needs taking out, any dead and dying as usual, and crossing, I'll sort out. Things like the acers, I do tend to get in there in early autumn if I'm not happy with the shape, and I tend to take out sections I don't like. This one's going to have a fantastic show and a fantastic colour, as a lot of the acers do, and a lot of the sorbuses, the mountain ashes, they have really good shows. So I tend to leave them alone. Now, this one here, this is an acer that's been in since last year, and it's already starting with some of its autumn colours, and it's looking good in the leaf section there, but the whole branch will start having its winter look soon, and it'll look really nice. So there'll not be a lot to do with that one because I've already done the shaping on that one and I'm quite happy with the shape. So most of my perennials, I leave them alone. I don't touch them. I leave them for the insects. I let the insects do what they've got to do, overwintering them, which, as I said, in turn gives food for the birds through winter. So if you've got an harsh winter, it's better that the birds come in and start eating bugs rather than your seed that you've put out for them. It's, in my opinion, it's a lot better to actually let them eat the creepy crawlies. They'll take out the good ones and the bad ones, and they don't care which one they're eating as long as it tastes nice. Roses can be pruned during winter, so sometimes you just got to get in there and give them a good bash back. And that always does the trick. Maybe I'll do a YouTube for the novices, show you how to do it, but some roses can flower through winter. And this one's starting to flower again. It's Gertrude Jekyll. It's doing really well. It's getting up there. I'm going to be hacking it back a little bit because I want it to thicken out. But yeah, it's doing well. So there's not a lot to do with that one. Now on the rest of the garden, pretty much all grasses this side. So again, leave them alone. I won't touch them. I will start the clearing around end of January, February. It seems to be getting earlier each year. There was a time when I would do these at the end of March, cut my grasses back, but now I'm finding that I've got to do it by the end of January because the way the weather's changing. So just thought I'd tell you that, and I'll give you a little discussion on when I do it, and that's when I do it. Not till spring. Leave well alone. My garden's a late summer garden, as you can see. There's still a lot to offer, and this won't really change until we get the worst of the autumn storms coming in, and then you know, literally within a few days it can change completely. So if you've got any questions on any particular variety, happy to answer again. But just to reiterate, when do we cut them back? How do we do it? I leave mine till spring. It varies from each part of the country. Lower down south, you'll be doing it earlier. Further up north, you'll be doing it a lot later. I'm around the middle of the country, so, you know, for me, I need to be dealing with all this stuff at the end of January into February. And that's a good time for me. So if you've got any questions, fire them away at me, and I'll see if I can help you. And thanks for your participation and your questions that I keep getting. It's great finally to get people reacting to what I'm doing. Makes what I'm doing worth doing. Okay, I'll talk to you on the next one. Ta-da.